to the Raising a Happy Camper podcast. I'm Allison Miller, your host, and I am here today with Jeff Campbell and Jill Bucaro. And we have the most interesting story to share. I can't wait for you to meet our happy campers, and they seriously are happy campers, I'm telling you right now. And I think there's a lot we can all learn from them. So Jill and Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So, all right, first thing is, where are you right now?
Where are we today?
Today
We're in Jonesboro, Arkansas.
Awesome. And you are in Arkansas, and literally, where are you sitting today?
We're in our schoolie, or our renovated school bus that we've been living in since the end of July. We left Southern California, where we had lived, both of us lived there for over 2 decades, in Pasadena most recently. So we took off and we have made our way about halfway around the country with the goal of being on the road for a year. So we're on month 5 now and just exploring the country.
Now, you are not alone, Jeff and Jill, right?
No,
we're not alone.
Sometimes alone is we're not alone much ever. Let's put it that way. No, we've got our son Simon. He's 12. He's with us, and then we've got our rescued 4-legger Holly, who gets to ride along with us as well.
That's awesome. So you don't have a full school bus, okay? But you definitely you're full as a family. Yes. in that school bus.
Our bus is very full, but it's not full of kids.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Have you ever been waved down like, hey, like we're waiting for the bus?
Thankfully, we're not bright yellow. I know some people have still kept that. I wanted to get, as far away from that as possible. So there's not, other than the shape, there's not a whole lot in the windows to differentiate us.
Probably for good reason. It's like against the law to have school bus like on your school bus if you're not. And so, same with like the stop sign, all that. So I'm guessing they ran into a problem here and there. And they're like, okay, you know what? You can't have school bus on. So, yeah,
they have different law. I'm actually a lawyer by background. There's a lot of different laws with that. So I don't think we also want people, driving around and, but you probably still have to follow the things like stop at the railroad track. Do you open the door and do all that?
No, it's funny. I heard when we first got into this, I was into all the schoolie websites, and there were things that someone somewhere got pulled over because their bus didn't stop and check the doors like they're supposed to. And they're like, it was really weird because our bus is blue, like it doesn't look anything like a school bus, but I haven't seen anything like that yet.
We have a regular door on our bus, so it would be hard, like we'd have to get up, unlock it, open it, lock it back in. So I'm glad that isn't the case.
Oh gosh. All right, so let's go back. It's like, I don't know how long we're going back to, so you guys have to tell me. And here you are, and you're talking about this adventure you're about to take. And I kind of want to hear also, like, where did Simon come into the conversation, and like, what did Simon have to say?
So it was about a year ago at this time that we were just talking about what we wanted to do, how long we wanted to be in California. Both of our families are out of state, in different areas in the Midwest. And, we had just been talking, like, should we be closer to our family? Should we be closer to cousins? Like, California is expensive. Are there places that we could live that are more affordable, but still maybe mild weather, maybe a shorter flight to our families, where we still have exposure to the outdoors. Like, so we were trying all these things and we could not figure out where that was. If we were close to our families, it was going to be winters, if we were, and, farther away, if we had good weather, we were going to be farther away. So we are taking a lot of things into consideration, and we're like, why don't we go on the road and figure out like where we want to live? Like, we don't even know so many places in the country. So let's go find them, and experience them and live there for a moment. And then we can make a decision at the end of the year. So we kind of got settled on that idea, and we presented it to Simon as kind of like a surprise and kind of like, here's what we're thinking. And he was very much for it. I mean, he was so excited. I think we had watched like a show about like RVs or something like that. And he has mentioned a couple times like, oh my gosh, I think it'd be so cool to go in an RV. We should go for a long time. Wouldn't it be fun to live there? Da 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 da. And so we kind of suspected he would be on board, but you know, we weren't sure because we were going to be pulling him from school, from friends, from, you know,
Right.
he's born and raised there in Southern California. So really everything he knew. So when we presented it, he was like just over the moon. We're like, okay, this is a good idea and we're on the right track. So then, you know, we just kind of started putting, you know, loans, searching for the bus. We actually started looking for RVs.
Yep.
And Jeff was like, I saw this school bus somebody renovated. Isn't this cool? And it was like, we're like, okay, yeah, we just need a school bus. They're super cool.
That's so cool. And it's very different. It must have been. So did you buy an original school bus and then you did the renovation to it?
I think ideally I think that's the goal ultimately, but we saw a window for us. And I started diving deep into how old of a bus and what engine and what transmission and what do we need? Because we had certain things that we wanted and that we needed. One of those, I think that's one of the reasons we steered from an RV was, you know, I grew up and we RV'd all the time and we'd go out for 2 or 3 weeks every summer. And by the time I was Simon's age, I'd been in the majority of the states west of the Mississippi, but there was no dedicated space for him. It was, oh, you sleep, we got to fold up the kitchen table and that folds down.
Right.
And there was no place for him to really be. And that was a really big deal. If we were going to be out, he needed to have his space.
Right.
And so it was funny too, because we had talked and we're like, we kind of made our decision before Christmas and we're like, hey bud, what do you want for Christmas? He goes, I want to rent an RV for a week for spring break. And I was like, so that was kind of that tipping point where we're like, maybe we should tell him soon. And I think we told him right after the first of the year and he lost his marbles. He was so excited. So it really became, you know, those things that we were looking for. And so we started looking. And you know, people are spending a year or 2 years because they're like, oh, I can do it on the weekend, or I have this much money, so I can spend that much money and I got the air conditioner put in, or I got the flooring put in, or whatever it was. And we started seeing some, and they're not everywhere. And so what we ended up finding was there's some in the Pacific Northwest. There's a couple in Texas. There's one in Missouri. There's one over here. And ultimately we found one, of course, in Vermont. So, Jill always laughs. She's like, what, you couldn't find one in Maine, even further away?
Yeah, we were in California. I'm like, that's about as far as you could get.
You got to start somewhere, right? You might as well start all the way up on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Well, and actually it proved to be a great thing.
Right.
Because we had seen it and they had been just finding the right one, because Jill's an amazing cook. She's a health coach. So we cook. We're not not an eat out family. So we needed a kitchen. We needed a space for him. You know, we needed these certain things. And this one came up in the end of May and I saw it and we were like, I think that's our bus, and bought it sight unseen.
Wow.
Got a hold of the guy. He had 2 young daughters. Great guy, built it himself, had all the background of what he did when he built it. We had the videos and saw the build going through, and it was perfect. So I flew to Boston, took a red eye. The flight I was supposed to have to go up to Vermont, they're like, oh no, we canceled. It was, you know, it was in June. There was about 5 days where all the planes shut down. Wow. And they didn't have pilots to fly up there. So like, oh no, we're not flying for the next 3 or 4 days. And I'm like, no, I have to go pick up my house. My house is in Vermont. So they drove us, the 3 of us it was a small plane, the 3 of us that were there, they drove us up there.
Wow.
And I drove the bus back to California over the course of 9 days.
By yourself?
By myself.
Wow.
I've never driven anything. I'm like, they're just going to let you drive that.
So
like,
you didn't really kind of all start together where, so you drove all the way back to California, and then what was the official date that your adventure began? Do you have like that date?
July 30th. July 30th, we pulled out. So you got back like the middle of June or the end of June. So we had the bus for about a month in our driveway so we could clean it. You know, I mean, it was really, we did minor little things, but mostly it was exactly the way we wanted it. But just, you know, starting to like understand like where we were going to put our kitchen stuff, what we could pack, how much closet space we had, how much room we had for this, where was the storage, like how many blankets do we, I mean, it was like, it was a lot of planning. So glad we had
Yeah.
that month to kind of figure out what to do. And then we did sleep in it the last
Yep.
3 nights, like in our driveway. Cause I'm like, I want to figure out like, what are we missing? What are we forgetting? Like, I want to
Oh,
try
that
to
was
cook
smart.
I
That was
wanna
really
try to
smart.
cook a meal in here. I want to sleep in here. I want to go to the bathroom in here. I want to like, what are we? Oh yeah, we toilet paper. Oh yeah, dish towels. Oh yeah.
Right.
So we did that, and then we pulled out July 30th.
Wow. That was
And
so
then-
brilliant to just kind of test it and, see what it is that you need.
And I
Um,
think that month that we
like, who
had helped
knows?
out too, because we had to get minimalist. So
Yeah,
without a
yeah.
whole lot of time, we went from living in our house in Pasadena. We got rid of everything that we own right now is either in 2 small storage units
right.
or it's on the bus. So it was a really cool way to just go and just, I don't, Marie Kondo, here we come. It's like, let's
Yeah.
just, nope, no love, let's get rid of it. And it made it an easier process. But it was a lot to pack and leave and wave goodbye and kind of head out and get
Now,
into
is
the
there,
unknown.
I'm sort of looking, this, you talk about raising a happy camper on this podcast, and I'm like, really, I'm focused also on Simon's experience here and what it was. I actually moved when I was 13 years old. It's kind of an interesting age, to make a big transition. And I'm thinking about him. And so at this point, you're not quite sure where you're going to end up, right? You haven't
Right.
decided this is the journey, and it's to
Mhm.
figure out where are we going to be as a family, or are there thoughts that you may just continue this life of kind of moving from different places, or do you not know? I'm just curious.
I don't think we know. And we went out with that, knowing that we don't know. I mean,
Right.
it really was like part of the journey. And so I think we're just taking in all the experience. Like, we actually love living on the bus. So could we do it more than a year? Probably.
Mhm.
But are there things that would be helpful to feel more grounded with like a home base? For sure. So I don't really know. And I think like we're giving ourselves at least until the spring or maybe even early summer just to kind of have that decision made. But even just in the few months that we've been out, we're already making a list of things that like we missed the first time around. Like, oh, next time we get to the Pacific
Yep.
Northwest, we're going to do this, this, and this. You could be on the road for a decade in this
Right.
country and not see everything. So
Right.
we thought, a year, and it's like already we're kind of like in the next fall thinking about like our route and like what we missed. And like we wanted to get to New England and we didn't before the winter. So those
Right.
kinds of things where, okay, could we loop around again and then, figure it out from there. But we were, we went through some beautiful spaces in like Montana and Wyoming, but during the summer, we were there like in the
Right.
early fall where it was gorgeous, where it's like, oh yeah, it's now we're looking at the temperatures over there. We're like, I don't know about that.
That's
So,
funny.
yeah.
I think about that. So I live in a bunch of different places. In the summer, I'm up at a camp in the Northeast. In the winter, I'm in the South. But I keep all my weather things. I just wonder for you guys if like every place on your phone you show the weather in all these different places, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Didn't know that's what happened there.
Yeah, we had to start deleting them because it was like,
Yeah, you gotta like. The
Yeah,
school
we're-
bus doesn't always work so well, and it's a whole different drive in the snow than it is,
I wouldn't know yet. It's been we haven't been moving while it's been snowing, so I've been purposely parked.
Okay.
No, it's been crazy because we're like, oh, we'll just get south. My mom's in middle of Missouri, so I was like, oh, once we get south, I was like, nope, we're in Arkansas and it's supposed to be like 12. So
Right.
it's what we thought was getting south and getting into the warmth and all that stuff. It just kind of does. It changes your perspective, and you forget. Like, we both grew up in the Midwest, and it was, oh yeah, it can be gray over the winter. Oh
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
the humidity.
right.
Or, oh yeah, the.
Especially living in California, you get used to all
We got
the
spoiled.
sunshine. It definitely affects, in my opinion, that's another whole conversation about what that does for our moods. So
Yeah.
tell me, when you figure out your destination, is it all planned out, or do you sit down and go, where do we want to go next? And how does Simon fit into the whole thing when you're choosing where to go?
Yeah, so he's now doing an online school that's based out of Atlanta, just south of Atlanta. They have a campus, but they also have an online program. And like, we've just been a real big fans of the school. We
Right.
love it. We think that he's doing great things. They're learning, like, more of those like life skills that I feel like we never learned. I'm like, oh, reverse engineering goals and conflict resolution and community standards and presentation skills and collaboration and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's amazing. So, but he will filter into the conversation and the decision as to whether he wants to continue being in school online or he wants to go back to an in-person like environment. And he's an only child, so I would respect his decision to go back to a school. So if that's the case, then it's just kind of weighing like, okay, do we want to stay with this school? We absolutely love it. That would put us in Atlanta. Or do we go to, did we find another school somewhere that's equally wonderful and he can go there? Or do we continue online and then it's not as important, school district wise where we land? We can factor other things in, the weather, distance to family, etc.
So what's interesting is, so he's online in school, but you're not homeschooling him in the sense that you have the responsibility of his studies, or is it a combination? Like, how is that working?
I would say it's a combination. It's, just saying like how the school's new compared to like how we went to school. Like I feel like we went to school these last few months to try to figure out like what the school is asking for and, how we can support. So he is online for live learning, but only a total of 2 hours a day. So the rest of the day is really ours to figure out what he wants to, learn, how far he's going to get in his goals. Like he has year-long goals that he's set, and it's really up to him, with our support to figure out like, are you on track to get through what you wanted to get through? So it's been a lot of like, okay, let's make this chart. And how do you, and what is this? And, they have a lot of terminology that we're not used to, quests and running partners and all this. So we had a big learning curve too. So it's a combination. I didn't want to do this all by myself the first year because I just have never done it. And I wanted a pattern to follow. And it is one thing I would say that came out of COVID. Prior to COVID, like, I would never have thought that I could support a distance learner. I didn't think I'd be good at it or would like it. I just wanted nothing to do with it. And then in California, the kids were out for a year. They were home for a year. So we had a lot of opportunity, to figure out if we could support his learning. And I was like, oh, I guess I can, and I realized like, oh, we kind of click and we get him and I'm learning his learning style.
That's cool.
That played a big factor into could we do this? Because I was like, yeah, we kind of did it. And they did have, a template and, classes and live learning, but we did a lot of support at home. So it's like that.
It's sort of a hybrid experience where you do have responsibilities as a parent. I remember when my son was in, he was in an interesting school, but when he started, it was like 4 or 5 years old. We all had to take the learning styles test so that the parents and the kids, we all knew, and all the siblings in the house. So I learned so much just looking at that learning style. And you don't have to do some formal tests through a school to do that. There's easy ways to do that online. But when I looked at my daughter, who wasn't the one in question in that program, and her learning style, it was like it wasn't me, it was my husband trying to get her like to sit at a desk, and she like needs to do cartwheels when she's studying for exams. And to be able to let go of that norm and to be like, this is what my kid needs, this is how they learn best. Like, you got to let it go. And then we see how we are and our impact on that. So, it's just interesting. And these days, I think it's a challenge, especially when you get to middle school, like, just trying to like understand what they're learning, because it's not like what we learned. And I'm a little older than you guys, but like, it's different. It's just the way the material presented, the way that they're presenting subjects that are even subjects that we've studied in school. Like all the things you're talking about would not be anything that I studied unless maybe in college, I had the opportunity to take a course. So it's super impressive. Like, he gets to develop this education in a way for himself, like where he's drawn and what he wants to learn. And then you guys get to play along. You must be learning a ton too.
It's been great. And I think that was one of the things that really drew us to the school, was the fact that they totally embraced what we're doing. They're like, you guys are traveling, you're on the road. this is amazing. And they were so flexible and fluid with, you know, like one of the electives that he has. They're like, oh my God, let's twist this so that Simon can take ownership of it. And so now, when you, because you would ask, like, you know, his role in kind of planning where we're going. Well, he's like super excited about the national parks. So that's a lot of where we gauge where we're going. And so he's now, and this was part of one of the most recent courses that they had, was putting together his own vlog on YouTube about junior park ranger and the parks and all this stuff. So he's actually taking ownership, writing the script, editing it, you know, shooting it, cutting it, doing all that stuff and posting it. I was
That's
like,
awesome.
I still can't, you know, I mean, trying to get involved on social media and things like that, it's a challenge. And you know, that influencer title or whatever it is, but just to be able to get him to be able to do that component of this, of that ownership, has been so great in, you know, and getting recognized for the things that you know, we just, you know, we were talking about that this morning, you know, getting recognized for things, not just like, oh, you had the most points, you had the highest grade, but it's how do you contribute? What did you learn? What are you bringing to the community? And those are those things that if we all just did that, how much further we would be ahead as a country and a society, to be able to kind of take that ownership and accountability and all those things that, shoot, I never learned that in 6th grade.
You know, that's sort of the whole point of this podcast is that, you know, I run a summer camp for kids, and what we do there is just this whole other experience. And it's so limited to just the summer. So we get to help kids find their passion. We were just talking to a camp on another podcast where the kids actually create the activities themselves, and then that's what they do. And, you know, we could do anything at camp. We're not governed by all these restrictions. You know, there's programs, there's a YMCA, and they do have the way they run their programs, but there are just a million kinds of camps. And so there's this freedom, you know, there's this time to learn, there's times to, you know, actually be active and do. And that's what I just feel is so missing from the educational system that we have. So knowing that, like, what you guys are doing is adventure, right? And that's a key component of the summer. And you're just taking that into your life year round. And you are like filling your kid's tank with all of that inspiration. And he's finding passion along the way. And that's that feeling that we try to bring to kids in summer camp. So, you know, I always, you know, doing these podcasts, trying to bring it all together, but it does make so much sense, you know, and that you could find a way of learning for him that, you know, fits somewhat in the norm. You know, you want him to have opportunities, I'm sure, to, you know, go to college if he wants to, you know, whatever that is. So he still needs the basic things to get there. I'm assuming, you know, you stay within that, and we have laws that, you know, we gotta do. These kids need to be in school. So, you know, it's just so great that you were able to find this program to do it. So I'm going to ask another question outside, because I do think it kind of fits in, because it's not, you know, all academic. Like we focus on all of like the time kids spend outside of school, like music. My son's a classical musician, music, art, sports, all of, you know, those things. And we bring that to kids. That's what Happy Camper Live does. If kids can't do it, especially like Simon's perfect, like that's exactly a kid that would do great with what we have to offer. I'm wondering, how does he find time? Like, I don't know, how does that stuff fit into his day? You know, like, does he have a passion or extracurriculars or things like that they call it?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the factors that we're considering with regards to like how long we would do this versus, you know, landing somewhere. So he could like take swim lessons and join a, you know, karate team or whatever, you know, things like that. But we get outside, like just personally, as much as possible. I mean, not only do we live in a 200 square foot bus where we want to get outside, but like the national parks, like he is really into that. So we try to bring that kind of stuff into like whatever he loves maps and streets and like directions and roads. So this has been like, I mean, it's perfect for him. We're like, okay, here's where we're going next. So he'll look it up on the map, and, you know, so he likes that kind of like learning. So we incorporate, I mean, it's a perfect opportunity to incorporate that. And then, you know, we have made stops along the way at friends and families' houses to make sure that he can be with his cousins, with other kids, with our friends. Yeah. And then we've been lucky at a few places that we've stopped. There's been other kids. So he's been able to, scooter and stuff like that. It's definitely a consideration, that I think about, quite often is just making sure like we're allowing him to be engaged in things outside of school, like he would be at home, and he's not with his friends and there's no, back and forth that way. But he's keeping in touch, against what we wanted to do. We did get him a phone. He's 12 for his 12th birthday in anticipation of this trip. So he can, record his own videos. He can FaceTime his friends, and all that kind of stuff. So that's been good. And it's been a good channel for him. But yeah, it's definitely, I wish we had a little bit more of like interaction with other kids, if we're going to be somewhere for a long enough time. The longest we're a place is usually 5 to 7 days.
Right.
Unless we're with a family member or something like that, where we would stay a little bit longer. So it's hard, to find like a soccer camp or an art class that's just that one, happens to be that one day that we're there the 3 days. Yeah.
And that's why we did what we did, because we also think parents are busy and they don't have time to drive their kids all around to try this or that. So by exposing them to all these different things, they might be like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that I was interested in that. And that kind of narrows it down for the parents too. So, but I'll tell you one thing that my son liked to do, he was pretty obsessive for a while, was geocaching. So I don't know if you guys do that, but like, how fun is geocaching?
It's the perfect opportunity for us because and we kind of forgot about it for a while, and where are we at?
Indiana Dunes.
We're in Indiana Dunes, but I think we're somewhere in California. And Simon found a cache without being on, like, he goes, that looks like a cache over there. We went over and we found it, we tagged it. So no, that's one of the things that he and I, we were up in the Indiana Dunes and it was cold. We got a lot of snow, and he and I were walking out there all bundled up trying to find everything, but we found it, and he's writing his notes and all that stuff. So
it's so fun. I've randomly been walking, like I'll walk around a lake and I'm like, I think there's a cache there. And like, it's just me. And I'll stop and I'm like, it is, and open it up. And it's a really, for people who don't know what that is, because I don't know if everybody knows what it is, but do you want to explain that? Because it is really cool. And there's like a whole website you can like.
I don't know. I think he came home. It was something he found on through school or whatever it was last year. And it's an app that we got. And he's like, oh, there's this geocache thing. I had no idea what it was. And basically it's a giant, I guess, almost a treasure hunt. And you can go and there'll be little notations on your app, and it'll say there's a geocache runner. They won't tell you where it is. They'll give you a general idea and some hints and some clues. We're in spring. Abe Lincoln's stovepipe hat, and it was a pipe coming out of the ground. So, and they'll tell a little bit about it, and it had a bunch of pennies in it, so it had an Abe Lincoln thing there. But it gives you some hints, and then you have to go and troubleshoot. You have to have some critical thinking and puzzle skills. It's kind of like a giant escape room outside, trying to find some of this stuff. But it's been,
what are they like?
It's just
trinkets.
They can be anything. It can be. It can be just a logbook, and you go, hey, we were here on October 22nd. Or some of them will have things in them that people will put, and then people will swap things out. They're like, oh, I took the troll doll and I put in a golf ball.
Exactly. There's like little swapping of trinkets, and then sometimes there's a book to say that you found it, and then you can also leave things and go on the website and you can add your geocache to it. And so it's like a whole system and app. It's really, really cool. We've actually talked about like doing some things with them. I think it's really fun, especially if you're traveling. We used to look for license plates. I mean, you guys, you get long trips, you're like bored, like, did we get to Hawaii yet? Oh my gosh, Hawaii. So geocaching is a little bit like that. You could keep the kids busy and interested, and then when you kind of get out to stop and find it, it's really exciting. And they're so random, and they are kind of everywhere. So it's just something that I enjoy. One of the things that I was wondering was like, and I know I don't want to go far into the future. I always yell at my husband. I'm like, why are you always talking to people about when their flight is going back? I'm like, they're here now. But I'm curious, like, you've got this great bus, you see this something that you might hold on to, or do you feel like you might share it with another family? Like, I'm curious, like, if you thought about that.
I think this kind of ties in with what we were talking about earlier about where we want to end up. Because one of the things we've realized is we really enjoy traveling.
Yeah.
And this country's amazing. Like the stuff that we've seen at, Custer State Park in South Dakota. We're going to national parks. We're not going to state park. And people like, you can't miss it. Just these little areas. And we talk about, Montana, like we fell in love with Western Montana. I don't know that we want to be there in the wintertime. So this might be an opportunity to be somewhere in the winter, be somewhere in the summer. Kind of, it's people do it all the time, right?
Yeah.
And using this as a possible home base, should we find land we want to live on this while we build.
Cool.
Finding something, we're staying at a spot in Jonesboro. The guy's got a beautiful pond here. I was like, my God, if we had the bus, it could be an Airbnb while we're here, while we're at our spot, and then take it with us and then Airbnb the house out. So I think there's a lot of flexibility with what we can do, but I don't see a reason right now why we would want to get rid of it.
Yeah, I'm just like, this idea that you bought it from that family, from that man, and then you have it, I'm kind of like, people are probably like, ooh, is that something? Because you said how hard it was to like find it. So I was just like, I wonder if they're gonna, if this is gonna be another family's adventure. But if it is, will you let me know? I want to know who the next people are, because we have to like keep talking to them, or you should, as your own podcast. It's like your bus just keeps traveling, and like what happens to all those great people. And now you have a dog with you too. You said you have a rescue dog. Did the rescue dog come with you from the beginning, or did you rescue him? Okay.
Yeah, we had her for 4 years or 5 before we, so she was just in the mix, like no questions. But yeah, she's been ours the whole way.
She's been a great travel dog. We got her, we rescued her, I think it was in April, and that 4th of July, we had a big family reunion in Utah. So we loaded up everybody into our little SUV, and she was like, oh, this is what we're doing. She laid down, she was asleep immediately. She was great. So
that's good.
She's asleep right now, sitting next to us. She's great. She adores the bus. She adores traveling. She's not so much into the bus moving part, but once it's parked, so
it's loud.
It is loud.
It's loud.
Yeah, it's a school bus. It's loud. Yeah.
And the engine's up front. It's one of the flat nose ones. A lot of those, the engines are in the back, so it is a little noisier. But we have a super cool arrangement too. The way that we travel is we don't tow. We have an extra car, but we don't tow it. And one of the first people that we met with that had a bus last February in LA, they traveled for a year, and they were on basically a tour for his work. And so they stayed at campgrounds, but he's like, oh no, my wife drives. And we were both like, sorry, what? And so they had 2 teenage daughters, and said it worked out really well because everybody kind of got their alone time. The daughters could switch back and forth with who they wanted to be with. And we use it. Jill goes out ahead a lot of times, and she'll scout, oh, you don't want to turn around in here, or this is tight, or
found
a parking spot, or let's go get groceries, or she can go off and do something. And I'm traveling at 55 miles an hour, and she can zip ahead and do her thing.
That makes a lot of sense. That's actually really good.
And for what we were going to spend on a tow bar and everything else, it was going to.
We have a Prius, so I mean the gas mileage is great, and it has been proven really helpful. Like he said, to be like, oh wait, the driveway, don't go past the driveway, you're not going to be able to turn around, or I'm going to go scope out this washboard like trail to see if I think the bus could get down it. So it's been great. Yeah, we've only stayed at I think 4 campgrounds. So we have a membership to an organization called Harvest Host and Boondockers Welcome. And so it's everything from breweries and wineries to farms and people who have land and museums and all of these like spots where you pay the membership and then you can stay at these places for free. They just ask that you patronize the business. If you're at a business or a farm, I'm like, that's no problem. So we've done that. And then there's the Bureau of Land Management. Like when we were west of Yellowstone National Park, we stayed just on a forest road. You can stay for up to 4 days for free. So we stayed for like 3 or 4. So I was surprised, like I had no idea. I mean, why would I need to know where you could stay for free, I guess, in the country? But I'm shocked at how many places there are
Yeah.
where you can stay. We've stayed next to lakes and forests and on trails, and like it's gorgeous.
That's really cool. I bet people just don't even know that.
We didn't know. And I mean, and at first I was like, are you sure we can do this? Like, and we could, and it's been amazing. So it's been nice, financially, but also just the experience to be like kind of out. We have solar, we have, freshwater tanks, we have gray water tanks, we have a generator. So we don't need to be at a campground with hookups, we're
Right.
self-sufficient, which has been like amazing. It's been an amazing sense of freedom that we
Yeah,
don't
you can
have
just
to
go
find.
anywhere. It's
can-
so cool.
Yeah.
Do you have your
Wherever the bus-
CDLs? Did you both have to get like,
You don't need one because it's not a commercial vehicle.
so
And
you
it's not
just
over
you
45
just
pounds.
drive it
Or
because
45
you're
feet.
not,
It is over 45 pounds, not 45 feet.
but you're not
Yeah.
using it for that purpose. So
Right.
you just needed to learn how to drive it. That's really cool.
That's what 3,100 miles from Vermont will let you do by yourself.
So do you have, I guess, like from a parenting, point of view, do you have structure in your day? Is there, or do you not, or just what is that sort of like for, as a family? Yeah.
It's a combination. And I think sometimes it's totally fine. And I know personally, sometimes I wish we had a little bit more structure, but it is what it is. So some days we drive, and that's just a different day than when we don't drive.
Right.
As far as like what we can do. So Simon's school, now that we're on Central Time, he gets done at 12:15. When we were on the Pacific, coast or Pacific Time, he got done at 10:15. So as we've moved, we've had to shift our schedule. If we get to the east, it's going to be different. And so we have windows where we can drive. And then, windows where he's here and we're working. We both work remotely. So we have those kinds of things are in place. They're a bit flexible, but it's like Simon's going to be on school these amount of hours. I need to work these amount of hours. He needs to work these amount of hours. So we try, but we've definitely thrown up our hands a couple times and been like, this is just the day has gone this way. Because if you're so tied to a schedule, it's usually just ends up in frustration because it just doesn't work. We didn't get the Wi-Fi that we wanted, or we did have to drive today and we thought we were going to drive tomorrow, or it took us 4 hours and we thought it was going to take us 3 hours. So we've just been super flexible and trying to have pillars where we can.
I would assume you have to be. I mean, I don't think you can go on an adventure like this and not just, that's the whole point, as just, I call it follow the feel. It's just like really nice in life when you could kind of get up and say, this is a good day to drive. And my husband and I are really good with last minute, like plans. Like, we're just like, I hate making plans. I'm just like, I got to do this. It's nice to be able to have that flexibility. And that's really like what the whole learning part is too, is just being okay in that space of like, you don't have to do it. And obviously, you have jobs and you have school. And so you know what you have to do. And Jill, you're a health practitioner and a coach.
Yep, I'm an integrative health practitioner and coach. So
that's awesome.
I was seeing my clients even before COVID. I was seeing some of them remotely, and then when COVID started, I was seeing them all remotely. And I do some nutritional consulting for a catering company, and it can all be remote. So it's been like, I'm so grateful. And it's really, he's working remotely, and Simon, we have the opportunity to do this online school. He's 12. And I was like, everything just fell into place for like, we have to go now because we can do it. I don't know when he's 13, 14, 15, if he's going to want to do that with us, So I was like, we have the age, we have the time, we have the enthusiasm, we have the flexibility. I'm like, we need to go. And so we did. I mean, we're just like, let's go.
And also like these days, there could be just like one factor that comes in. Unfortunately, it could be, not unfortunately, I'll change that word, but sometimes it is like, there's a family member and you want to go, but you're sort of tied to that, or he's involved in something in his school, or he has this best friend, or there are these things that like, but in this moment, in this space, you recognize like, this is it. Like, we
Mhm.
can all go, we can make this work. And you took it, and you took advantage of that and just decided to start your journey. I'm really excited because I'm part of it now. So now I'm officially like,
are.
I'm on the road with you guys. And
I
I always
know.
say, this is about making camp friends. So like, we're also connected now because you're my camp friends. And like, I've been on the road, and you guys should come up. We have a campsite up in Pennsylvania. So if you're up that way,
For
you come
sure.
and stay with us. We'll actually feed you in our dining room and everything. It would be super fun. And then we could do maybe something else. Yeah, this was just so great. I feel like we talk for like we could just keep on talking.
Yeah.
Do you have sort of, I mean, obviously anybody who's listening so far, whoever had this thought in their mind is going to be like, now's the time we have to do this, or we have to figure it out. So you've clearly inspired everybody, for sure. Just like, let's talk about Simon, raising a happy camper. What do you think, what do you think 3 things that he's gotten out of this that you could see will really impact him as he goes through life, that will, sort of help, him look back and say, yeah, that was the time that, really brought this into, who I am as a person.
There's a flexibility component in there, right? And there was some things early on with him that that he liked a lot of structure, but I think the flexibility of exactly what you're saying. We don't know where we're going to be next week. We have an idea of what we'd like to see. We don't know how that day is going to go. So having some of that flexibility and fluidity to just kind of roll with the scenario and roll with the situation and just adapt, and grow with it. And I think that's the cool thing is there's hopefully he's, we kind of eliminate some of the constraints that we're held to societally. Is like, oh, you're supposed to do this and you have to do this, and by this age you got to be here and you got to do this and you got to do that. And if you're not, then you're a failure, and yada yada yada.
And we have a different kind of learner. Like he's a different kind of learner. So I think that was also the wonderful thing about this school that we found, is that they really do embrace different kind of learners. So he has an opportunity now to be the star because of what his strengths are, and not because he can never be that best at math, and not because, he's not the best speller. And so it's like, he's getting the messages now through this school that like the way he is and what his strengths are important and valuable. So I think that's been really great. And it wasn't even necessarily, I knew that could come from this school, but I think just seeing it come through has been really exciting for us, because, and he was in a very awesome school in California. So that was not, there was never anything negative there.
Right.
But I think just like a standard school system, he would have gone to another junior high, or he would have gone to another high school where, I don't know, would he have been, led to believe he's not a good student, or because he doesn't learn in this particular way. So that's been really awesome. And I think the other thing I would say too, just about like what he's learned, or maybe what he's gathered, is people. So we've run into, obviously, like so many people, from the people that are next to us. We run into another schoolie. We work in coffee shops. We go to markets. We eat out. We're at campgrounds. We're at national parks. We meet rangers. And he's just gotten to interact with people from all over the country, all walks of life, all different, ideas on religion and politics. And it's like, it just doesn't even matter. We've just met some really amazing people. And then you have to kind of be a little forward, like, excuse me, like, 'cause we're not from here. What do you know about this? Or how do we do this?
Yeah.
And really, he's not ever really been that shy about that. Like, we'll go out to eat and he's like, I'm going to go ask our server for a napkin. I'm like, okay. Like, he just goes, I'm going to look for the manager. Like, he's really, a friendly, outgoing kid. But I just think the constant interactions with different people has been really impactful, or I hope it has, because it just shows you, like, whether we're in California or Arkansas or Montana or South Dakota, like, it just doesn't matter. There's really wonderful people everywhere.
And for us as well. I think that's because, listen, we all swing ideologically one way, typically. And I think we're more centrist, but it's like you start seeing people that are on another side of the fence, whether it's politically or religiously or whatever it is, but you're just people. and you get to work through all the minutia and all the stuff that the kind of the cloud that's been presented, and just go, oh, hi, I'm Jeff. And that's
Absolutely.
the basis of everything. So that's
actually the whole thing about camp that is so amazing. We put people together and you actually become you find your authentic self, I call it. It's just like you take all that other stuff out and you just who you are. And you spend this kind of time getting connected with that. And I know from my daughter, she used to say, I just want to live my life like my camp self. And that's been her goal. It's just by that, she means her authentic self, I believe. And so as your son gets in touch with all of that and has these interactions with everybody, he's really figuring out who he is in this world. And more and more kids need to figure out how to, deal with people, So I think it's just wonderful, just absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. One last thing with that is when we've run into these other families with kids is, in a neighborhood, you've got cliques. In schools, you have cliques.
Right.
Hang out with who they hang out with. But when there's 3 of you or 6 of you or 2 of you, you just find a way to be like, listen, I got to hang out with this guy all day long. Let's make this work. And so accommodating and, different ages from, 4-year-olds to 16-year-olds and playing in games and board games and things like that. It's been fun to see that kind of not forced friendships, but like, hey, let's hang out. We're all out here together and we're all we got right now. So let's make this fun.
Well, Jeff, that's the old neighborhood, right? That's the old neighborhood and it doesn't exist anymore in most places, or at least where you were coming from. And, so that whole idea of, the 4 or 5-year-olds and the 15-year-olds, and it's just sort of one family. That's the way I grew up. We'd all be on the same block together. And, you just play with whoever ended up going to play outside that night. And, it didn't matter what their age was. It was just, you were there to play. So to provide him that kind of experience of, and it's funny to say that when you're really on the road and it isn't a neighborhood, but you're creating that sense of community wherever you're going. And you're showing him that wherever you are, you can create that for yourself. And, it's really cool. I honestly could sit here for hours talking to you guys. So I want to have you back sometime. And, I would like to come back, if we can come back when you've sort of figuring out like whatever, I always talk about the chapters. So like whatever the next chapter is to this adventure, I would love to talk to you guys again and share that with our audience. I think people would be super interested. And, I just thank you for being here. So give them all the handles, like how do people follow you and all that kind of stuff?
So Instagram is, our Instagram handle is at WanderWellBus, WANDER, not wonder. Like not all who wander are lost. So WanderWellBus. I think that's the best way to track us down. Yeah.
Okay.
The first ones are on there. The Forest School is where Simon's going to school. They're fantastic out of Trillium,
I was going to ask you that.
And we can provide kind of a little, some stuff for them. But yeah, the Forest School has been fantastic. He's got, there's a small little, they call it the middle school studio. And there's kids from Kenya. It's not a huge school. Mexico, all across the country. And just to be able to interact with different ages, different cultures has just been fantastic. So they've been phenomenal.
Wow, that's great. And kudos to you guys for, saying yes, right? And just jumping in and following, your I don't know, your dream, your God, I don't know what you call it, but just following the universe that's sending you signs to go off.
Yeah.
And so thank you for being here on the Raising a Happy Camper podcast. We can say for sure Simon's an awesome happy camper, and Jeff and Jill, you are too. So, and then the dog, what's his name? The little dog?
Holly.
Yeah, another one. So I'm just super excited to meet you, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Allison.
Take a moment to shine on Happy Camper Life.